She wants the man who isn't always available because his presence carries weight, purpose, and self-respect. His life doesn't revolve around her, and that creates depth, curiosity, and admiration. She's drawn to the man whose time is earned, not demanded, because value rises when access is not limitless. Scarcity amplifies value because it reminds us that what is limited naturally feels more meaningful. When something is always within reach, always ready, always available on demand, the human mind stops appreciating it. This applies to relationships just as strongly as it does to everything else in life. When a man becomes constantly available, replying instantly, showing up immediately, rearranging his priorities without hesitation, he unintentionally removes the very energy that makes his presence feel significant. It isn't about playing games or withholding affection. It is about understanding human psychology. The more predictable and ever-present someone becomes, the more easily they fade into the background of her emotional landscape. Consistency is important. It builds trust, reliability, and emotional security. But consistency is very different from constant access. Consistency means he shows up when it matters. It means his words align with his actions. It means he is stable, dependable, and intentional. But being constantly available means he doesn't protect his time. He doesn't have a life with structure, and he doesn't have boundaries that communicate his value. And without value, there is nothing for her to reach for, nothing to admire, nothing to pursue emotionally. What she feels drawn to is a presence that is both steady and selective. A man who is consistent in character, but not always free. A man whose time is meaningful because he invests it wisely. When he is not available 24/7, it signals that he has a life that existed before her and continues alongside her. It communicates that he has purpose, goals, commitments, and passions outside the relationship. This creates depth. It creates curiosity. And curiosity is the root of sustained attraction. Constant availability, on the other hand, sends the opposite message. It suggests he has nowhere else to be, nothing else to do, and no one else who needs him or values him. It unintentionally places her at the center of his world in a way that feels heavy, not flattering. When a man drops everything the moment she calls, texts, or even hints at wanting attention, it doesn't make her feel special. It makes her feel responsible. It makes her feel overwhelmed by a presence that does not balance itself. Scarcity is not about absence. It is about proportion. It is about making sure that the time he gives is intentional, not desperate. When she feels that his presence is thoughtful, not automatic, she cherishes it more. She listens more closely. She notices the effort. She values the moments because they mean something. When he is fully present in the moments they share, but not lingering in every moment outside of them, she experiences him as a man whose presence enhances her life rather than someone who clings to it. The truth is, attraction lives in space. It breathes in the moments where she wonders what he is doing, how he moves, what drives him. That mystery is not manipulation. It is the natural magnetism of a man who does not give himself away too easily. Scarcity amplifies value, and value deepens desire. This is why consistency matters, but constant availability weakens presence. A woman is naturally drawn to a man whose life reflects purpose, structure, and direction because these qualities signal emotional strength, ambition, and self-respect. When she observes a man who is grounded in his goals, committed to his responsibilities, and moving with intention, she feels a deeper sense of trust and admiration. It tells her that he is not drifting aimlessly through life. He is building something, becoming someone, and living with a sense of direction that gives his presence a certain weight. This kind of energy is magnetic because it shows he is not controlled by the need for constant validation or attention. He doesn't need to be available every second because his life actually requires him. His time has value because he gives it purpose. Endless free time, on the other hand, sends a very different message. It doesn't communicate freedom. It communicates lack of priorities. When a man can always drop everything, always be available, always adjust his schedule without hesitation, it signals that he is not anchored to anything. There is no mission driving him, no discipline guiding him, no higher sense of responsibility shaping him. Over time, this becomes unattractive because it places pressure on her to fill the emptiness he refuses to fill on his own. It makes him feel emotionally dependent, even if that is not his intention. A man with purpose carries a different presence. He wakes up with goals. He structures his day. He invests in his growth, his work, his habits, and his long-term vision. This does not make him distant. It makes him complete. And a complete man is far more intriguing than one who is constantly searching for ways to pass the time. She wants to feel like she is entering the life of someone who already has a sense of identity, not someone who is waiting for her to define it for him. Purpose gives him direction. Direction gives him confidence. Confidence gives him an energy that she cannot ignore. When she sees that he has responsibilities, passions, and ambitions, she naturally respects him more. His time becomes meaningful because he earns it. His attention becomes valuable because it is not scattered. His presence becomes desirable because it is not overextended. Instead of hovering around her life, he moves forward in his own, and that momentum draws her towards him. She doesn't want a man who is available because he has nothing else going on. She wants the man whose availability is selective because he is pursuing something bigger than himself. This selective presence does not push her away. It creates space that she wants to move into. It invites her to become part of his world rather than the center of it. And when she enters the life of a man who is guided by purpose and structure, she feels a sense of safety in his direction. She knows he won't be swayed by momentary emotions, distractions, or insecurities. His life moves with intention, and she wants to align with that kind of energy because it elevates her as well. In the end, it isn't the free time that attracts her. It's the discipline. It's the mission. It's the sense that he knows where he's going, and she feels inspired to walk beside a man who is truly going somewhere. Emotional discipline creates a magnetic energy because it shows control, balance, and inner strength. A woman feels drawn to a man who doesn't react impulsively, doesn't crumble under pressure, and doesn't let every emotion dictate his behavior. Emotional discipline isn't coldness, it's maturity. It's the ability to stay grounded, calm, and intentional, even when situations provoke frustration, excitement, or insecurity. This steadiness becomes attractive because it signals reliability. She knows that his emotions won't swing wildly. She knows he won't suffocate her with neediness. She knows he won't disappear when things get difficult. His emotional presence becomes something she can lean on, not something she has to manage. This kind of self-control creates a natural magnetism because it reflects a man who is in charge of himself. He doesn't let desire push him into chasing. He doesn't let fear push him into clinging. He doesn't let anxiety push him into overthinking or over-explaining. When he feels something, he processes it before acting on it. When he wants something, he approaches it with clarity instead of emotional urgency. When he cares, he expresses it without drowning the other person in it. This balance makes him stand out because emotional discipline is rare, and what is rare is valued. Over-accessibility, however, dissolves that magnetism instantly. When a man is too emotionally available, too quickly, too constantly, or too intensely, it doesn't create connection. It creates pressure. It makes him feel predictable. It makes him feel emotionally exposed in a way that doesn't come across as vulnerability, but rather dependence. When he responds instantly every time, shares everything he feels without restraint, or tries to be emotionally present at all times, the energy becomes overwhelming. It tells her that he doesn't protect his emotional resources. It tells her he doesn't pace intimacy. It tells her he is driven by the fear of losing her rather than the confidence of valuing himself. This kind of over-accessibility doesn't give her the space to feel, think, or desire. It removes the sense of mystery. It removes the sense of suspense. It removes the opportunity for her to miss him or wonder about him. Emotional discipline creates space, and space is where attraction grows. When he is emotionally regulated, he knows when to lean in and when to step back. He knows when to speak and when to stay silent. He knows when to be present and when to allow distance to build depth. A woman feels drawn to the man who understands pacing, the man who doesn't force connection, but allows it to unfold, the man who communicates, but not excessively, the man who feels deeply, but doesn't let emotions run his life. Emotional discipline makes every gesture more meaningful because nothing is impulsive or desperate. Every moment of affection feels intentional. Every expression of interest feels grounded. Every interaction feels balanced. Over-accessibility, in contrast, gives too much too soon. It removes the structure that attraction needs to breathe. It turns emotional energy into emotional noise. And once the mystery dissolves, the magnetic pull weakens. But the man who practices emotional discipline creates a controlled, powerful presence. And that presence is what keeps her drawn to him long term. Emotional discipline creates magnetic energy because it shows that a man is led by strength rather than impulse. When he doesn't react instantly to every emotion, every uncertainty, or every desire, he demonstrates a level of maturity that is deeply attractive. It shows he can hold himself together even when situations try to pull him apart. A woman feels safe around a man whose emotions don't explode, scatter, or cling. She feels drawn to the calm in him, the steadiness, the self-control. It signals that he doesn't depend on her for emotional balance. He already has it within himself. This restraint doesn't mean he is cold. It means he thinks before he speaks, observes before he judges, and feels before he reacts. That inner discipline turns into a quiet confidence that radiates without effort. It's a presence that doesn't demand attention. It earns it. When he speaks, his words have weight because they aren't coming from panic or insecurity. When he gives affection, it feels meaningful because it's not given as a transaction or out of fear. His emotional discipline becomes a subtle magnet, pulling her toward him without him having to chase. Over-accessibility, however, dissolves that energy quickly. When a man is overly available emotionally, responding instantly, sharing excessively, seeking reassurance constantly, or offering emotional presence without boundaries, it creates a sense of imbalance. At first, it may seem sweet or caring, but it quickly becomes overwhelming. It removes the space she needs to think, feel, and desire. It turns his emotions into something she feels responsible for managing rather than something she feels inspired by. A man who is always emotionally available without pacing himself communicates something unintentionally, that he needs her attention more than he values his own emotional stability. It signals that he is too eager to please, too quick to open up, too willing to reveal everything without allowing connection to develop naturally. When emotions are poured out without rhythm, the mystery disappears. The magnetism weakens. The sense of discovery fades. She knows exactly how he feels at all times. And instead of deepening intimacy, it creates predictability. Emotional discipline, on the other hand, creates space for curiosity. It allows her to lean in because he isn't pushing. It gives her room to miss him because he isn't overwhelming the connection. It builds trust because he handles his emotions with maturity instead of urgency. When he shares, it feels authentic, not forced. When he expresses his feelings, it feels thoughtful, not impulsive. When he shows care, it feels grounded, not desperate. A woman is drawn to the man who can feel deeply without losing himself, the man who can care without clinging, the man who can communicate without flooding. Emotional discipline makes him attractive because it shows he has control over his inner world, and that control creates a presence she respects, admires, and gravitates toward. Over-accessibility removes the contrast, the pacing, the mystery, and the natural tension that desire needs to breathe. But emotional discipline, that is the force that turns presence into power and power into magnetism. Mystery isn't manipulation. It's the natural expression of a life that extends beyond one person. When a man has depth, passion, and purpose, there will always be parts of him that she cannot fully predict or understand, not because he is hiding anything, but because he is genuinely occupied with a world of responsibilities, dreams, and experiences that existed long before she arrived. Mystery comes from movement, from growth, from having a direction that doesn't revolve around external approval. It comes from living with intention, not from playing games. A man becomes mysterious when he is fully engaged in his life, when he invests in his work, develops his mind, nurtures his passions, and maintains relationships, routines, and commitments that matter to him. This naturally creates a sense of intrigue because his life is layered. He has stories she hasn't heard, goals she hasn't seen, thoughts he hasn't expressed, and moments she isn't part of. That depth draws her in, not because he is withholding anything, but because he is multidimensional. She can sense that his identity does not begin and end with her, and this makes him feel more valuable, more interesting, and more grounded. Manipulation is manufactured. It is when someone pretends to be busy, pretends to have options, pretends to have a life. Mystery, on the other hand, is authentic. It is the quiet confidence of someone who genuinely prioritizes his growth, his boundaries, and his personal evolution. There is nothing artificial about it. He is not crafting an illusion. He is simply living. And because he is not centered around her attention, she becomes curious about him. She starts to wonder what drives him, what challenges him, what inspires him. This curiosity deepens her attraction because human desire thrives in the unknown. When a man's world is full, she feels the pull of wanting to be part of it. Not because he withholds himself, but because his presence feels earned, not given away. This is the difference between mystery and manipulation. Manipulation tries to control someone's emotions through confusion or unpredictability. Mystery grows naturally from being unpredictable because life itself is unpredictable. When a man is evolving, changing, learning, and expanding, even he doesn't always know what the next step will look like, and that makes his journey compelling. A woman doesn't want a man whose entire identity is accessible on the first page. She wants someone with chapters, with depth, with layers, with substance. A man with no mystery is a man with no private ambition, no inner world, and no direction. When he makes her his entire world, he loses the very qualities that would have made that world worth entering. Mystery is the natural byproduct of independence. It's the result of a life that demands his attention, his energy, and his commitment. She doesn't need him to play hard to get. She needs him to be someone worth getting. And when his life is bigger than one person, his presence becomes more valuable, more respected, and more deeply desired. A man with identity doesn't chase because he is not looking for someone to complete him. He is already grounded in who he is. His sense of self does not depend on whether someone accepts him, validates him, or gives him attention. He knows what he stands for, what he believes in, and where he's going. This inner clarity becomes the anchor that keeps him from moving out of desperation or emotional urgency. He doesn't pursue someone out of fear of losing them. He allows connection to unfold naturally because he knows his value isn't determined by how quickly he can win someone over. A man with identity has built a life that reflects his values. He has passions, goals, routines, and standards that shape the way he moves. His time, energy, and emotional space are not handed out carelessly. They are reserved for people who genuinely align with his direction. This selective sharing is not arrogance. It is self-respect. He doesn't hide his world, but he doesn't offer it to anyone who hasn't earned their place within it. He invites people in slowly, intentionally, and with discernment because he understands the importance of protecting the life he has built. Chasing, on the other hand, is a reaction rooted in insecurity. It comes from a desire to prove worth or to convince someone of their value. But a man with identity doesn't need to convince anyone. He knows that the right person will recognize his depth, his consistency, and his purpose without him having to plead for attention. He knows that genuine connection is mutual, not something he forces through pressure or pursuit. When he doesn't chase, it's not because he doesn't care. It's because he refuses to abandon himself to gain someone else. Sharing his world selectively allows him to maintain balance. He doesn't let romance consume his entire life. He integrates it into a life that already has structure. He shows glimpses of who he is, his vision, his discipline, his passions, his character, but he reveals it at a pace that respects his emotional boundaries. This makes him more intriguing, more respected, and more appreciated. People value what is not immediately accessible, especially when it is genuinely meaningful. A woman feels more drawn to a man like this because his identity gives her something to admire, something to discover, and something to trust. She senses that he is not trying to impress her. He is simply living in alignment with himself. She senses that being part of his world is a privilege, not a guarantee. This selective access elevates the connection because she feels chosen, not chased. She feels invited into something real, not pressured into something needy. A man with identity knows that the right person won't need his constant pursuit to stay interested. She will be drawn to the strength of his character, the clarity of his vision, and the authenticity of his presence. By sharing his world selectively, he protects his energy, preserves his dignity, and attracts relationships that are built on respect rather than urgency. A woman respects boundaries that come from self-respect because those boundaries reflect clarity, maturity, and emotional responsibility. When a man sets boundaries from a place of inner strength, not pride, not defensiveness, not ego, she can feel the difference immediately. Boundaries rooted in ego are rigid, controlling, and fear-driven. But boundaries rooted in self-respect are calm, steady, and intentional. They don't push her away. They teach her how to treat him. A man grounded in self-respect knows what he can accept and what he can't. He knows how much time he can give without losing his focus. He knows how he wants to be spoken to, how he deserves to be treated, and how much emotional energy he can offer without draining himself. These boundaries are not demands. They are filters. They protect his well-being, preserve his identity, and prevent him from giving more than he can handle. When he stands by these boundaries, he communicates that he values himself enough not to tolerate chaos, disrespect, or emotional imbalance. A woman feels safe around a man like this because he is not passive, nor is he aggressive. He doesn't tolerate everything just to keep her close, and he doesn't push her away to feel powerful. His boundaries are steady. They do not change based on his mood, her mood, or momentary emotions. This consistency gives her a sense of stability. She knows what he stands for. She knows where the lines are. She knows she can trust him to remain himself even when feelings are involved. Boundaries from ego feel completely different. Ego-driven boundaries are about control. I won't respond to prove a point. I'll punish you for disappointing me. I'll withdraw to protect my pride. These behaviors create tension and emotional games. They make connection feel fragile, conditional, and unstable. A woman does not respect that. She reacts to it, but she doesn't admire it. Ego uses boundaries as weapons. Self-respect uses boundaries as guides. When a man's boundaries come from self-respect, they uplift both people. They show that he holds himself to a high standard, and he expects the relationship to reflect that standard as well. He is not trying to dominate the connection. He is protecting the health of it. He communicates with clarity instead of emotional threats. He responds instead of reacting. He walks away from disrespect, not love. He gives space without creating distance. He holds the line without raising his voice. A woman respects these boundaries because they show that he values himself enough not to lose himself in the relationship. That makes her trust him more. It makes her admire his discipline. It makes her treat him with care because she can see he treats himself with care. She understands that his boundaries are not walls. They are frameworks for a healthy, balanced connection. A man who respects himself teaches others how to treat him. A man who doesn't will always struggle to be understood, appreciated, or valued. And a woman will always respect the boundaries that spring from self-respect far more than those built on ego. When she can't predict you, she pays deeper attention to you because unpredictability awakens her curiosity, sharpens her awareness, and makes the connection feel alive. Human beings are wired to focus on what they can't fully figure out. When someone becomes predictable, the mind relaxes, stops observing, and shifts into autopilot. But when a man carries an energy that is not easily decoded, when his responses aren't automatic, when his patterns aren't flat, when his life has rhythm instead of routine, she starts watching more closely. Not because she is confused, but because she is intrigued. Predictability doesn't mean reliability. Reliability is about consistency of character. Predictability is about sameness of behavior. A man can be reliable and still unpredictable. He can be solid in who he is, yet dynamic in how he moves. He can have integrity without being boring. When she can't predict him, it's not because he's inconsistent. It's because he has depth, because he doesn't live on emotional repeat, because his life is not centered around routine responses or predictable reactions. She pays deeper attention because she wants to understand him. She wants to know what motivates him, what sparks him, what shapes the decisions he makes. When he has a strong sense of individuality, when he follows his own rhythm, when he makes choices based on his purpose instead of her expectations, she instinctively leans in. His presence requires her presence. His energy requires her focus. She doesn't want to miss anything because she senses there's more to him than what is visible on the surface. A predictable man is comfortable, but comfort alone doesn't generate attraction. It doesn't challenge the mind. It doesn't open new emotional layers. It doesn't stimulate curiosity. When she knows exactly what he will say, how he will react, and where he will be, there is no discovery left. Predictability removes the sense of emotional exploration. But when a man lives with intention and evolves constantly, even he doesn't always know his next step. And that organic unpredictability keeps the connection vibrant. Unpredictability doesn't mean mood swings, inconsistency, or confusion. It means he has a life that moves. It means he is not sitting by the phone waiting. It means he is not emotionally available on demand. It means he is constantly growing, improving, shifting, and challenging himself. When he evolves, his energy evolves with him, and she feels compelled to keep up. She pays attention because she wants to be part of the world he is creating. She also pays deeper attention because unpredictability signals emotional security. A man who is not overly predictable is a man who isn't controlled by fear. He doesn't cling to routine to feel safe. He doesn't need constant validation. He doesn't shape his life around expectations. This self-assuredness makes her feel more drawn to him because it shows confidence, true confidence, not the kind spoken, but the kind lived. When she can't predict you, she becomes more present, more invested, and more connected to the unfolding of the dynamic. She values each moment more deeply because she knows it isn't repetitive. A man who cannot be summed up in one sentence, one pattern, or one behavior becomes someone she wants to understand, remember, and explore. And that attention, voluntary, focused, and rooted in genuine desire, is the foundation of deep attraction. Her attraction grows when she feels she has to earn more of your presence because value increases when access is not automatic. Human psychology is simple. What is scarce is desired. What is abundant is taken for granted. When a man gives unlimited time, unlimited attention, and unlimited availability without requiring any reciprocity, he unintentionally removes the tension that fuels attraction. She doesn't feel the need to show up, to engage, or to contribute emotionally because his presence comes too easily. But when she senses that his time is given through intention, not desperation, she begins to value it differently. Earning your presence does not mean playing games or withholding affection. It means you live a life with priorities, direction, and standards. You're not available to everyone. You're not accessible at every moment. You're not shaped by the fear of losing someone's interest. Your world isn't open like a public door. It's selective, meaningful, and preserved. When she realizes that your presence is a privilege and not an obligation, her mindset shifts. She starts to invest. She starts to put effort into how she communicates, how she shows up, and how she connects. Not because she's insecure, but because she respects what you offer. When your presence holds value, she begins to match your energy instead of expecting you to carry the entire dynamic. She puts thought into conversations, she becomes more attentive, and she cares more about the quality of the interaction. A man who gives without limits becomes emotionally invisible, but a man who gives with intention becomes unforgettable. She pays attention to how you speak, how you move, how you respond, and how you live because she knows your life is not an empty canvas waiting to be filled. It's a story she wants to be part of. Her attraction deepens because effort creates emotional investment. When she has to earn more of your presence, she feels proud when she gets it. She feels accomplished when she connects with you. She feels more emotionally involved because she is actively participating instead of passively receiving. This is how attraction works. What she works for, she values. What she values, she protects. What she protects, she doesn't want to lose. A man who requires nothing becomes forgettable. A man who requires standards becomes desirable. Your presence should never feel like a default setting. It should feel like something given to the right person at the right time for the right reason. When she senses this, she approaches you with more care, more intention, and more depth. She wants to keep earning access to a man who values himself, who values his time, and who values the energy he shares. Her attraction grows because she feels the natural thrill of earning something meaningful. not through manipulation, not through games, but through genuine connection built on mutual effort. When she sees that your presence is not automatic, she rises to meet the standard, and in doing so, she becomes more emotionally invested, more attentive, and more drawn to the man who knows his worth. In the end, everything comes back to one truth. A man who values himself becomes a man she naturally values more. When he protects his time, guards his energy, moves with purpose, and carries emotional discipline, he creates a presence that cannot be ignored. His mystery isn't a tactic. It's a reflection of a life that's full. His boundaries aren't walls. They're expressions of self-respect. His selective availability isn't distance. It's dignity. She is drawn to the man who isn't always available because his presence feels earned, not assumed, intentional, not needy. He doesn't chase because he knows his identity. He doesn't over-explain because he trusts his worth. He doesn't give unlimited access because he understands that value is felt through scarcity, growth, and direction. This kind of man makes her pay attention. He makes her rise in her own standards. He makes her invest, not because he demands it, but because his energy inspires it. She wants the man who holds himself to a higher level because being close to him elevates her too. When you live with purpose, discipline, and self-respect, you don't have to try to be desirable. You become desirable naturally. Your presence becomes a privilege, your attention becomes meaningful, and your absence becomes felt. That is the real reason she gravitates toward the man who isn't always available. He is whole, grounded, and intentional, and a woman will always be drawn to the man who chooses himself first, not out of ego, but out of truth.